This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
The views expressed on the following program are not necessarily those of WPSL. However, we're the ones who've encouraged you all along to like and share them on your favorite social media and with all your friends and neighbors, because it's time for the African American Scene, presented by Rudy's Health Insurance LLC, hosted by the one and only Rudy Howard.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. Always glad to be with you here on a Wednesday night. Last week, I was going over Project 2025. And for those of you that don't know what that is the formal conservative plan that they have developed that they will put in place if they are fortunate enough to win the election in November. And there's some very scary aspects of that. But tonight, I am not going to continue with that. I said I was going to continue last week because I have the pleasure of my nephew, who is here visiting, and he is retiring from the service after the Air Force after 21 years. And I thought you might find it interesting to hear what he's done over the past years while in the service, because he's had some really interesting jobs and been to some very interesting places. And that phone number is 340-1590. That's 340-1590. Donnell, say hello.
Hello, everyone.
Yes, this is Donnell Allen Coleman, and this is my sister's son, my nephew. So how many years have you served, Donnell?
Like you said, I've been in about 21 years. By the time I'm kind of on terminal leave right now, so by the time it's all said and done, 1 September, it'll be 21 years and 7 months, just shy of 22.
Okay. So as I remember from my short time in there, you're what they call a short timer.
Oh, very short timer.
What is your current rank?
I am a master sergeant.
And you are stationed right now where at?
I'm over in Ramstein, Germany, finishing up a tour there. Me and my family will be headed back to the States in about 5 weeks.
Okay. And how long have you been in Germany?
We'll call it 3 years. We're not going to make the full 3 years, but we'll say we got there the summer of 21. We're leaving the beginning of summer of 24. So it's a 3-year tour. So we'll call it 3 years.
Okay. And prior to that, where were you?
So I started off, I had about 1.5 years of training, and then I started off in Elmendorf, Alaska for 4 years, which something that I didn't know I was going to enjoy, but I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. I did that for 4 years, followed that up with Hawaii for 4 years, and then I got selectively hired to Andrews Air Force Base, and I stayed there for 9 years before I got the opportunity to end up in Germany.
Yeah, wow. And you thought, well, I know, God rest her soul, your grandmother came over to visit you while you were there. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to make arrangements to get over there, but I never got there. But you found that to be okay, Alaska?
I did. I mean, so it's funny, when I chose Alaska, it was in basic training, because at the time you had the career field I was in, you had to choose. Well, you didn't have to choose. You had to put what locations you wanted to go to. I could only go to Alaska, Oklahoma, and Georgia at the time. I chose Alaska because I was tired of sweating, and it was the opposite of Florida at the time. So I was like, I wanted the opposite. Oh, I'm sorry. I could go to Japan too. I didn't choose Japan initially, and then looking back at it, I tried to get to Japan, but it all worked out because I got to see Japan a lot. But Japan was an option as well. But I chose Alaska because it was, again, it was the opposite of Florida. And then when it came time to, like, I had the assignment in hand and I was going, I was like, man, I started doing some research because I didn't know if I made the right choice because I didn't know anything about Alaska. But then I found out there was a city there. And then when I got there, I was there for about 2 or 3 days, and I found like a Juneteenth celebration and a cookout and everything. So I was good to go after that. I was like, all right, I'm good here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They had a Juneteenth celebration in Alaska.
Oh, a big one, yeah, a big in a huge park. It was a cookout, live entertainment, all kinds of stuff for the kids. But it was nice, and I just found myself doing stuff I had never done before. Even I didn't really grow up in Florida. I was a military brat, so I would do outdoorsy. My outdoorsy stuff was playing basketball or sports or stuff outside. I didn't do a lot of outdoorsy activities. And in Alaska, I did all kinds of stuff that I never thought I would do: whitewater rafting, four-wheeling, snowmobiling, camping, just fishing in a river, like standing in a river with waders and like just all kinds of stuff that I just tried once, and some of it I liked and some of it I didn't, but I just tried it. I just tried everything because what else, there was nothing else to do. In the winter there, you had to really be purposeful about what you were going to do. But when the summer was there, you only had about 3 good months of lots of daylight, so you try to do everything, and anything anybody was doing, I tried it. So it
Yeah.
was it was, it was I ended up liking it.
So you did some fly fishing.
I didn't do fly fishing specifically because there's some skill to that, but I did just go. I did a little bit of fishing in the river. I didn't catch anything, but I went with some people and they showed me what kind of how it goes. I caught nothing whatsoever, but I did attempt it. I put waders on and stood in the water and looked across, and less than 100 yards away there were bears. Like it was that kind of fishing.
Ah, so you saw the bears.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They were there. I mean, it was one of those things. It's kind of like you coexist with them, just like gators in Florida. You coexist. You don't, and you try not to impede on what they're doing, and you respect them, and you move on. I was with a lot of people with a lot of guns and a lot of bear spray, so I felt fine. They were cool as long as they were comfortable. I was comfortable because they did it a lot more than I did.
I see. Well, I gotta tell you, that would make me a bit nervous because your uncle plays golf, and
Hmm.
when I hit my golf ball over by the water, and there's alligators in all the waters here in Florida.
Oh yeah.
I
Oh
I
yeah.
come up to the water, and the first thing I do before I chase the golf balls, I start looking
Hmm.
and any gators and
Yeah.
you know,
Yep.
gators and snakes, and then
Oh yeah.
with those big palmetto bushes. Uh,
Hmm.
I'll hit a ball in there, and the local Florida boys tell me, they go, Rudy, go in there and get that ball. I go,
Yeah.
hell no. That looked like snakes to me. When
Yeah.
when I,
Right.
when I can't buy another golf ball, I'm gonna stop playing.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. So they just kind of like with the Gators, they're there, they see you and
You respect the Bears, and yeah, you respect it, and they teach you some rules. Like the whole first week I got to Alaska, I forget exactly what the week is called, but it's unlike any other base I've been to because normally we call in processing a base. They're telling you getting your money right, all your medical stuff. Alaska was the first week there was telling you all the ways you can die. The great ways at Alaska is fun, but you can there's a lot of ways you could just die if you're dumb. You can get lost and die. You could freeze to death in the winter. Bears, just moose. So you're sitting there for that week and you're like, man, it's a beautiful place, but it's definitely dangerous if you're negligent when you're out in nature because it's the last frontier for a reason. Once you go outside of Anchorage, you're in the wild, you're in the forest. I mean, you're in the wilderness. You're not in a developed area. It's you in nature, and you're not the highest. They always tell you you're not the highest on the what's it called, the food chain anymore.
so did you see moose when you were there?
Oh yeah, yeah. Moose are all over the base. Yeah, they're
Oh,
walking around.
they just
Yeah.
walking around on the base?
Hmm.
Ah.
Yeah, they're not everywhere, but yeah, you see them quite a bit. I mean, they're everywhere. They're like, I know it's weird, but they're just like deer. They're everywhere. They're just ginormous compared to what you're used to seeing for deer. And they get hit on the road all the time. Just like deer.
I would imagine they would really wreck your car if you hit one of them big
Oh
suckers
yeah,
there.
yeah. it's not a good thing when if you're not in a truck, if you hit a moose, it's usually you hit those tall, skinny legs and that giant body falls into your car. So it's usually not a good thing for
Well,
you if you're not in a truck.
I would imagine there's a lot of trucks in Alaska.
Oh, 1,000. I had a truck when I was there. That's the first time I had a truck. 4-wheel drive, it's worth it for the snow and just the weather, just everything that's ever going to happen. A truck is probably what you want.
Yeah, yeah. Now, what I find interesting about that is, what did you do about in the winter when it's so cold? I've heard various stories like you had to get a heated dipstick to put in your car, or uh,
So I will say that Alaska, so where I was, Anchorage is on the water. So while you do get the Alaskan winters and they're long and there's a lot of snow and whatnot, it's not as extreme. There's a base about 350 miles north called Eielson. They get the extremes, -67, and you got to plug your car in and put a block heater on your engine. And you could do that in Anchorage too. But I got away with, I didn't have on my first cars, I didn't have a block heater, and I had a block heater on my truck, but I didn't usually plug it in. It was okay because again, the water kind of mitigated some of those extreme temperatures. So you didn't have that. But as you go further north, it turned in, the Arctic Circle was up there. So once you got up there, it was I had a buddy that worked on the oil fields up there, and they didn't turn like when they had all their vehicles up there, they didn't turn them off at all in the winter. They did hot engine running oil changes and everything because it's too cold. You turn the car off and it wouldn't start again. So they would keep the cars running for months at a time once you got into the winter months. But down in Anchorage, I didn't experience that. It got cold. I got -30, -35 with wind chill, which is freezing, right? But they've seen a -60 and stuff like that, which is, I know it's unfathomable, but that's too much for me. I had to
well,
do
I
Arctic
can't.
survival up there, but other than Arctic survival, I tried to stay away from up there.
Man, your uncle can't even imagine that. What Arctic survival? What is that? Some training that they give you?
Yeah, based off the location. So I did survival school because I was air crew my entire career. So we had survival school that we had to go to, like just basic survival skills on how to navigate, land navigation, building fires, staying dry, building shelters. Some of it had to do with evading if you're in hostile territory. And then when you go to a cold weather climate like Alaska, there's another class called Arctic survival, and that's again how to what you need to do to stay to stay alive if you go down in the Arctic. And it's a lot of it is building fires, how to build a fire, keeping a fire going. If you're layered up and you start sweating, it's weird, but it's counterintuitive. But if you start sweating and you're laid up, you want to take a layer off, stop sweating, and then get layered on. Because if you start sweating, you're cold and that'll freeze. Like it's all kind of stuff. We learned how to build snow shelters, uh, just all kinds of information that I still remember. And that was almost 20 years ago. But I think those are very impactful classes because you immerse yourself in it and you don't really refresh it every year, but it's something that they've proven through people going down that you may not go through the class all the time and you only refreshed it every 3 years, but those things are very impactful and you remember if you do go down and you people if there's a group of you, enough people will remember enough things that you can usually survive long enough to get rescued. So that was definitely some of my best training.
Well, my listeners here don't know anything about snow, and for the
Oh,
most
I'm
part,
sure.
uh,
I'm sure.
how do you build a snow shelter?
They taught you a certain way. I mean, if you really had to do it, it would be you would have to have some. They gave us equipment. They showed us. That was the cool thing about the training, right? They show you how to do it, and then you have to do it yourself and sleep in it overnight to prove that you did it correctly.
Oh,
I mean, I guess
Jesus! So
yeah.
you
So
had
the
this,
to
you had to build a
oh yeah.
shelter and sleep in it.
Hmm. Yep. The first night out there, you sleep in a group in a tent, and then the second night you sleep in your shelter. So yeah, it's you had some supplies. So we had some pre-cut wood. They taught us how to tie it up and make it like it's kind of like a teepee, like it would be like a half a teepee shape that you would lay flat, and then you'd make a little dome over it with like a parachute. Now, honestly, you wouldn't have that. So in a survival situation, you would substitute the parachute with like um like trees or branches and whatnot. And but the biggest thing is, yeah, you cover that up and then you get snow. And once you build up a layer of about 6 to 8 inches of snow, that insulates you, and you'd be surprised. While you're doing it, you're freezing, and you're like, "Oh, these dudes don't know what you're talking about." But once you get 8 inches of snow on top of something, and you had to put that snow on top of it and pack it in, and the instructors would come jump on your shelter, and if it collapsed, then you didn't do it right. So it was like you really had to do it, and you'd build the door a certain way, make a door plug with another parachute packed with snow, and yeah, we had some 60 below sleeping bags, and we slept in there for the night. And that's, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but that was the general idea. They showed us how to do it, and you had to execute it, and that was part of the conditions on getting through the class successfully.
Well, that's really interesting. And you weren't cold when you were sleeping in there?
No, that sleeping bag was the truth. And they gave you a pointer, and I didn't believe it, and then I did it. They were like, "Hey, most people won't do it because they don't believe us," but they were like, the way this sleeping bag is designed is your body heat is what heats it up. So you need to take as many clothes off as you can in the sleeping bag, and your sleeping bag will be warmer. And I did eventually, because I was in there and I was a little chilly, and I got warm. I stripped all the way down to my t-shirt and underwear, and that sleeping bag was amazing. I slept like a baby out there. And then, before, when it was time to get up in the morning, you're in the sleeping bag because it was big enough. You wiggle your pants back on, get your shirt back on. You sit, you get to the side. You got, you had a little setup, and there was enough room to move around. Put your boots back on, and then you moved on with the day.
Man, that is really, really fascinating. Really, really fascinating.
Oh yeah.
Again,
Oh, yeah.
my audience, the phone number is 340-1590. If you have questions for Master Sergeant Donnell Coleman, please feel free to give us a call. And so, what an extreme. You go from Alaska to Hawaii.
For sure. And so Alaska was one. So I stayed in my same, what we call career field. It was airborne communications. But Alaska, I was a radar technician on a very old jet called AWACS. It was it's a Cold War era jet, very, very old, but still does some cool stuff. Hawaii opened me up to what I currently do and what I've been doing for the last 16 years or so, which is DV airlift. And so I got, I got a kind of a choice. It was one of the few times I actually had a choice. So I was in the assignment system in the Air Force. If you're overseas already and there's another overseas assignment, in their mind and monetarily, I guess it's cheaper to keep me overseas than it is to move someone from the States overseas. So there were one of my supervisors called me in, and he said, "Hey, the chief is on the phone, wants to talk to you." I talked to the chief, and he said, "Hey, I noticed you got Hawaii on your dream sheet." And I will never forget, it's a Friday. He was like, "I'll give you a weekend to think about it." But he was like, "I know you have an assignment to Nebraska," because I did have an assignment to Nebraska at the time already. He was like, "But you have Hawaii on there. There's a slot opened up. You have priority because you're already overseas. I got 8 more bodies. So if you turn it down, then I'll figure out who's going to go." He was like, "But you could think it over or talk it over for the weekend." And I said, "Talk it over with who?" And at the time I wasn't married. I was like, "I don't need to talk it over with anybody. I want the assignment. I want to go to Hawaii." There's no one to talk it over with. Write me in.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
for
a lot
sure.
of people heard that I was talking to the chief, and they thought, when they hear they want to talk. "Ooh, man, what happened?" So I go back in my office, and most people already knew I had an assignment to Nebraska, and I logged into my email, and I was like, I don't know. He told me to log in and check. Something happened with my assignment, and then I turned around, and then just messing with those guys, acting like I didn't know. And I said, "Anybody know where Hickam Air Force Base, Hawaii is? I guess that's where I'm going now." And they were like, "Oh, F you, F you." Everybody else was getting assignments to Georgia and Nebraska, or Oklahoma. Nobody was really getting Hawaii. Was just a random opportunity that opened up for me, and it opened up a totally different opportunity for me in the flying in the what we call the DV community.
And that was your second time in Hawaii, because your dad,
Yep.
mom and dad, was
Yeah, I
stationed
was
in Hawaii.
right. I lived
And
there when I was kindergarten, well, I guess pre-K, kindergarten, first and second grade. So
yeah,
yep.
I remember, because your Aunt Brenda and I came over to visit.
I know. Yep.
Yep, you remember that? Yeah.
Oh
That
yeah,
was
we got.
that,
I think everybody came to visit Hawaii. That was,
yeah, yeah.
that's a good deal.
That was pretty cool. So
Oh yeah.
so what were your duties now? Now that you go to Hawaii, describe
hmm
what it is that you now were doing as you move to Hawaii.
So DV airlift is essentially what you would recognize as what you see on TV when you see the high ranking government officials, when you see the president, vice president, or just or the secretary of state on those blue and white aircraft, when you see them in those, that's DV airlift. That's the Air Force moving all those people around. So in Hawaii, lower level version, but you're moving around 4-star generals, the PACOM commander who is in charge of. He has a big AOR basically from the coast of California all the way out to India. The U.S. Forces commander in Korea, which is South Korea, and then the Pacific Air Forces commander, which is the guy that's in charge of all the Air Force personnel, guy or girl, in charge of the Air Force personnel in the Pacific region. And so that's who you're supporting. And I would on the plane outside of, I was a radar guy. I was all about radar, old school stuff. Well, this was a nice jump up because now I'm a communicator on board, right? And I'm making sure they can communicate. So, and we're talking about radios, telephones, secure and non-secure on both sides, and then the internet. The internet is probably the driving force behind what they're doing because those commanders in this day and age, they got to stay connected. There's no longer they can't fly and just a radio doesn't suffice. They got to be able to talk to the president at any time. They got to be able to talk to Secretary of Defense at any time, and so that's what our job is on there. Any capability that they have in their office to communicate with an outside entity, that's what we provide them on the plane, in flight, using satellite communication usually.
What does the inside of one of those planes look like? Nothing like a commercial plane.
No, but they are commercial planes. So right now, I currently fly on a Gulfstream on a G5 on a Gulfstream 500. So you would or a Gulfstream 5, you would recognize the other plane that in Hawaii, I was flying on a Gulfstream and a Boeing. It's called a Boeing business jet 737. So most of the planes and all the airlines now, even though they're getting a lot of negative coverage for, it's a 737 MAX. So that is a bigger version of what I was flying on there, in addition to the Gulfstream. And then at Andrews, we had 757s, older models, but they are just commercial airliners, and then they're modified with the comm and the seating. Basically, everyone has essentially a first class seat, so you're not going to have 200 or 300 seats on there. You're going to have 40 like first class seats for the party and the crew. And then obviously the paint scheme would be different, and then you'll see a whole lot of antennas and different stuff that you would normally not see on a plane because that's all of my stuff.
Okay,
but they are commercial planes.
But they were originally commercial planes that were modified.
That are bought, yeah. The Air Force buys them, modifies them, and then puts them into service. Utilizing them the way that we utilize them.
So when you went from Hawaii to Fort Meade, right?
To Andrews and Maryland.
To Andrews, yeah. Yes. To Andrews. Yep. Your job changed again?
It did not change. It just was a different. So it's a little bit like, so what I do now in Germany and what they do in Hawaii are very similar. We're flying combatant commanders. We're doing the same job. Very important, but it's not as high vis. When I went to Andrews, the unit that I went to directly supports the vice president, the secretary of defense, the first lady, secretary of state, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and then anybody else. It's basically we support everybody in the government except for the president. So that is a little bit higher stakes, right? So it's the same job. Technically, I got the same equipment, more redundancy, but it's just on a bigger level. So right now, if I make a call and we fly through some weird weather or something happens electronically up in the air and the call drops, not too big of a deal. We reestablish the call or we explain what happened. Usually it's not our fault. It's usually physics or space or just something, it's all magic that it works anyway most of the time. So the magic broke. But going to Andrews, like I said, the stakes are higher. So I've been called to the Pentagon many times, not personally, but just as the subject matter expert. A call dropped with the president, between the president and the vice president, or between the SecDef and the president, and they want to talk. They will investigate it to the end to find out what happened. So that's what I mean by the higher stakes. A call dropping means a meeting at the Pentagon.
So that you have to answer for why that call dropped.
1000%.
That's a little bit of a pressure.
Yeah, it is, and it's at first it's funny just because I was there for 9 years, so it transitions from me being like super uptight about it to like, well, I know what this is going to bring. And then when I'm flying as the instructor or the evaluator on there, then I'll take charge. And obviously whoever is actually initiating the call, I will go in their place. I'm not going to let them go. But yeah, there's definitely some pressure with it, especially when you know that things are going on in the world and there's classified calls or classified video teleconferences. Like we can do what we're doing right now. This can be done in the air too on a classified level, and it happens all the time. And this is what I would set up as well. I would set up a video teleconference on a classified network and right into the situation room and talk. They would talk directly to the president. So it was those kind of things and we have to account for where we're flying, the angle of the plane. Is the tail going to block the signal to the satellite? Are we going to transition transponders? I have to account for that all before. That's why we're on there to tell them, hey, you can start this meeting now, but we're going to transition to a new satellite coverage. So I would recommend delaying it for 10 minutes or let me make an early transition so then you can talk with no worries for the next 5 hours. And then, when you don't catch stuff like that, that's when you get that's when you get in trouble.
I got my first caller for tonight, Winnie. Winnie, how are you?
You got your master. What part of service is he in?
Air Force.
Huh?
He's in
What
the Air
part of
Force.
service?
Huh?
Yeah.
Did you say what service am I in?
Yes.
Air Force.
Yes.
20 years. He retired.
Yes, he's in the process of.
I'm a status of a Bigfoot. I know you say bears and stuff like that in Alaska. Have y'all ever seen a Bigfoot, a real live Bigfoot before?
No, definitely no.
I hang up and listen at the radio.
Okay.
All right.
No, definitely no Bigfoot, but plenty of bears and everything else.
Yeah, no Bigfoot though.
No.
Yeah, well, that's Winnie. But anyway, so here's the interesting. So you flew people through 3 different administrations. Obama administration, Trump administration, and the Biden administration.
That is true.
And in the Obama administration, your primary passenger was Biden.
Was Joe Biden? That's right. He was our primary customer.
And how often do you think you were up in the air with Joe Biden?
How often? Depends. So I did a lot of his overseas trips. So the vice presidents in general, they fly a lot in the States, like a lot. And that's cool, but I prefer if I'm going to fly instead of burning holes and running around the States, I would do overseas. So I've done. I mean, if you go back and look at because all this stuff is publicly available. However many times Joe Biden did around the world tours, I did 1 or 2 around the world with him for sure. But I flew with him overseas for the most part. I did some campaign stuff during election season with him, but generally speaking, I was probably, if I flew with him, I was overseas, and then I flew John Kerry a lot, and then any number of the Secretary of Defense, like Chuck Hagel, Leon Panetta, actually, First Lady Obama, and then even in the Trump administration, same thing. Flew the vice president a little bit less because we tightened up the program a little. We did something with the program a little bit, and I became the SecDef lead. So I flew with the Secretary of Defense a lot more by design because they wanted each DV to have a group of people that were assigned to that DV, and they see the same faces all the time because there's some value in that. It makes them and their teams calm down a little bit more when there are problems. If they have a trusted face versus a new person every time telling them that what the new problem is. If they see me every time, then they know that I'm not BSing them. So I'm gonna yes, this went down, but we can do this. Because what would happen is we had something called, I guess old school terms, it would be a hot rep. Anything that happens, we have to write an email, and that email goes from us to basically like a 4-star general, and it gets everyone spun up, and it just initiates a bunch of meetings. So if we could mitigate some of that's what we tried to do. And that was a big part of our job and we teach that too, right? People learn the calm stuff, but the big thing they had to learn was expectation management. So we offered a variety of services. These are what we offer. if you tell these, and this is how I taught it all the time, if you tell them you can do something and we don't normally do it, that means we now do it forever, because that is the expectation that you have set. So don't tell them we can do stuff that we don't normally do, because we have we have a contract with them too as well. Like, this is what we offer. And that's not just to say that we don't want to do certain things, but it can become too much as you pass through administrations and you just start stacking on duties for us, the flight attendants, anybody else that's involved in the crew. So you got to manage those expectations.
Was Joe Biden personable?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and what? So, I guess my insight on him then versus now is this: I flew him a long time ago, so he's a lot younger. So yeah, he would come up and have a lot of conversations, and he didn't sleep a lot on the plane. So sometimes when I was trying to sleep, he would come talk to me or someone else, and I'd be like, "Oh my goodness, I'm so tired." But it's the vice president, so he'll stand up and talk. But no, yeah, very nice. Most of the DVs, I don't have any negative stories about and we call them DVs, any of the principals at all. It's usually their staff who you would, if you got into something or anybody that was rude or just ridiculous, it was the staff. It was never that person.
How about Michelle?
Yeah, same thing. I did a 9-day China trip with her mom, and the girls. I took them to China for 9 days. It was probably spring breakish time when the girls were kind of out of school. But yeah, I did that. That was one of my favorite trips because we got to, I know we have all these weird things about China, but I've been to China about 10 times, and it's actually pretty fun. Once even after you do all the touristy stuff, the Great Wall and stuff, if you go to Beijing, I'll say that Beijing is a more normal city. I've been to other cities in China that is kind of like the Big Brother, everyone's watching you, weird stuff.
Yeah. Well, I want you to share something else that you and I talked about when we were sitting out on the patio.
Mm-hmm.
That I want my audience to understand. You are not allowed to take and promote partisan positions as a member of the service.
So it's not so you can't. So here's the thing, and that's what we were talking about the other day. So if you're on and this is where social media gets people in trouble. If I'm on social media and I'm posting constantly that I'm in the Air Force and my unit and what I do, that's fine when you're not advertising things that you're not supposed to advertise, right? But now you have associated you and your social media with the military service, whatever position, whatever service you're in. Now, if you take a hard left, hard right stance and criticize any elected official, you are going to get in trouble, because you're not protected by freedom of speech when you're in the military. Not to that extent. That is something that you lose. And we're talking, you might not get the specific briefing on it in other jobs in the military because you don't have that direct contact with these people, but we get that brief all the time. Like, yes, you have freedom of speech to an extent. So there are consequences for you speaking out against the people I equate it to, like we talked about, any other job that you have. If you worked at Target and you got to a high level position at Target and then you criticize the CEO of Target, you don't think you're going to get talked to? Like, that's just not the way it works. Yes, you're still an American citizen. Yes, you can say what you want to, you can still participate in the process. You can still you can still man polling stations. You can still do a bunch of stuff. You just cannot do it in your uniform, and you cannot show any affiliation to a service. You can't ever make it look like you are speaking on behalf of a service to promote a political opinion, a political agenda, or a politician. But if you want to do that on your own, that's fine. But again, the social media thing gets cloudy because people associate themselves. And on your social media, if you don't say where you work and no one really knows, all right, well then, it might be a gray area. But most people post themselves in uniform. They post their cool trips. They post their promotion ceremonies. And then when they have an issue, they post the issue. And it's not saying that you can't have an issue. It's speaking, and there is a line to it, right? They're not saying, like, people didn't get in trouble saying, I don't agree with this policy. That's not what they got in trouble for. What I was speaking to you about is when Trump was coming into office, people openly saying that they're not going to serve, like they're not going to do their jobs. And that, you just can't say that. Like, that's just common sense. That's not what you signed up for. You got to look a little bit deeper into what you raised your hand for. And you can believe whatever you want to believe at home, and you can say whatever you want to say in the confines of your house. That's where it's always safe. But publicly, you can't say that, and the leadership can't allow you to say that. It's just a fine line.
And what's interesting is people were disciplined
Mm-hmm.
for speaking out of turn with respects to a member of the government.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because
Interesting.
it were, and it wasn't without warning. They got warned twice to stop doing it. We got
Oh,
called into big, gigantic meetings and told, "Hey, you guys need to stop this. It's election season. It's emotional. Let's calm it down. No matter who wins, we still have to do our jobs." Blah 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 blah. We got two big meetings by a colonel that told us two times to settle down. And then when people didn't settle down, then he has to do what he has to do as well.
yeah, that's interesting. I'm sure
Yeah.
my audience is listening to this, and they probably didn't believe that there would be such restraint on you as far as the politics are concerned.
For
But
sure. And it's
I
just
just I
big.
just I just think it was fascinating that you flew Michelle Obama and her two girls. How were the girls? Were they well behaved?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have a lot of interaction with them. They were in the back. I don't know. We generally only spoke when we were, when we had to. If I'm doing comm, I don't. She doesn't have a comm requirement, right? We support the first lady by just kind of as a requirement because she's a part of the official party, but she doesn't have a comm requirement. So usually when I'm flying the first lady, whether it be her, Melania Trump, Dr. Biden, those were easier missions because my job is just to make sure that they have internet and make sure, excuse me, that the TV is on whatever they want or put on movies and stuff. They don't have a communications requirement. So there's not going to be a bunch of VTCs or high level calls. So that was usually like a very low stress mission.
Are there sleeping quarters on the plane?
Oh yeah, there's a stateroom on the bigger on both jets. There's a stateroom on the big jet that you normally identify as Air Force Two. When you first walk in the second door, there's a bigger stateroom, and then in the smaller planes, the 737, it's the stateroom's in the back, all the way in the back of the plane. So it has a couch that will pull out, called a divan. It'll pull out into a bed, and then there's like an office or excuse me, like a desk so they can work.
And there's a conference room on the planes too, huh?
Yeah, a little conference area. Yeah, where the staff sits.
Yeah, and that's what you have to make sure that the internet is properly connected in there for so that
For
they can
every
have
yeah
a
for
discussion.
exactly because no matter what the primary user is doing, the staff is nonstop working. So that's who really I'm making sure is connected. They're making a lot of the phone calls to coordinate things to make sure everything's good. Even if you're flying the first lady or the vice president, Secret Service as well, I give them certain connections. So when we're taking off and landing, they can actually make certain radio calls to their people on the ground. Everyone has to coordinate, and then we would have press on the plane as well. Now we didn't do anything for the press other than provide them a seat. We didn't provide them with any comm because they're from ABC, CNN, and all that, and they're just not authorized to use that stuff. They're not government officials, so they would just be usually hitching a ride to wherever they were going with the person.
Mm-mm. Interesting. Very, very interesting. Again, that phone number, we're coming near the end of the hour. Phone number is 340-1590. So how many countries would you say you traveled to?
I mean, I have a little tracker in my phone that I've had for over 10 years, so I know specifically I've been to 93.
Wow.
Yeah, I've been to every continent on except for Antarctica, and I've been to every continent many like multiple times, like beyond like five or six each at least, if not more. So yeah, I've been around a lot of times, and that's what this particular job. Once I went to Hawaii and beyond at Andrews, that's what it opened me up to. Is that's the real travel that people come into the military for. That's why I enjoyed it. So a lot of people come to the military so they can see the world, but they see the world via, okay, I got stationed in Japan, and while I'm stationed at Japan, I'm going to travel on my own to go see Asia. While I did get to do that, as I'm stationed in Europe right now with my family, I have just my job specifically took me all over the world to do my job. So that's a very unique experience.
Yeah. And just for my audience, Danielle has three kids
Hmm.
and a set of twins with those three kids.
That's true. All
Uh,
boys.
yeah, all boys. Yeah. So you've been to 93 countries. What would you say your favorite places that you traveled to?
Uh, I usually say so. I used to just say Singapore on its own because that is probably my favorite country. Been there quite a few times, and every time I got to go, I was there for 3 days or more, which was that's why I love it. Like I've just it's a great country with great food. And the cool thing is, yeah, it's cool to go to other cultures and figure out how to communicate in different languages and especially with the internet and stuff. But in Singapore, the language of business is English, so it's really easy. It's very clean there, and it's very easy to navigate. And they speak English everywhere, so it's I just love, and it's in the middle of Asia, so that's probably my favorite place. Japan is a close second. Believe it or not, Colombia is somewhere I like. And then me and my family and I just went on our own to Morocco, but I've been several times and I really like Morocco has kind of climbed into probably my top five now.
Okay, okay. I've always wanted to go to Singapore, and I wouldn't mind going to Morocco either. I don't know if I'll ever make it. I'm getting too old now, but
And
but
Morocco's, Morocco, people think of that. Singapore is a full day. I'll give you that. But Morocco is a flight over. You can depending on how you get there, and it's not as we think of Africa as way over there, but those countries that are in Western Africa are not as far as you think. It's just as far as flying to Europe. You're just flying a little bit south, so it's 7 to 9 hours. You can probably get there.
yeah, yeah, that's about what it takes to get to Hawaii, really.
That too, yeah. If you're going
Yeah,
over it, but yeah, that's a.
from here it takes about that.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, how did you find Europe?
Living there, I would say my biggest shock with living there versus visiting. So visiting was always cool because you're just there for a couple days. You're in a hotel, you walk around. So I've been to all the cities, and they all kind of start to look the same. Normally, what we do is go get a couple drinks and go. If I've already been there, I'm not going to do all the touristy stuff. But living there in Germany specifically is definitely a different experience. It's not the United States is very fast paced, right? It's go 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 go, and things are happening, and you don't have to wait a long time. Europe as a culture, and I would say Europe, and it's weird to say that because every country has its own culture, but overall, every culture in Europe and every different country and every different ethnicity ethnic group that's there, they're definitely all more patient and they're all more laid back than we are. So they, when Jenica, my wife, she works with local nationals at which are Germans on base. And if and my mom, even my mom back in the day, she'll tell you she worked with local. They'll tell you if you try to tell, we're like, go 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 do all this stuff at work. They're like, no, we're at work. This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm supposed to do. And if you want me to do all this extra stuff, and if you keep trying to pile work on me, I'm taking sick days. I'm not. She was like, and a phrase that they use is we work to live, and Americans live to work, and we're not Americans. And I was like, we could take something from that, right? They take their vacation days, they close their businesses for 3 to 4 weeks whenever they want, and they go on vacation, and they're on holiday, they're gone, they're just closed, and you're just SOL, and you just have to figure out something to do. Versus here, where somebody might go on vacation, but somebody's gonna stay behind to make sure the business is open, and just the idea of 24-hour stuff is not really there. Um, there might be a McDonald's. The area I'm in is heavily Americanized. There's 80,000 Americans there, so they cater to Americans a little bit. But once you start venturing out of that area, you're not going to find a lot of people speaking English. One, even in that area, if you don't know what you're going to eat for dinner by 6 or 7 o'clock, everything closed, so you got to cook. Like there's no, oh, let's figure out what we're going to eat and then go get it randomly from someplace. It's closed. You didn't make your decision. Now that's Germany. Caveat to that is go to Italy and you're walking around and then they're eating dinner with little kids outside. The kids are outside at 9, 10 o'clock at night, and it's all about talking in the community. And so when you go out to eat to a restaurant, that's a bigger change. Like we want to eat. Hey, what's taking so long? It's not taking long. In their mind, they're like, oh, you came here with people, so you want to talk to them. So they'll give you some water and let you talk for 40 minutes. They'll come back and take your order and they'll let you talk for 40 more minutes. So the dining out experience for us, where we probably want to wrap it up in an hour, hour and a half, could be 3 to 4 hours there.
That's very interesting
And it's
because
all about and it's about being social, not just to eat and leave.
yeah, And because here the waiters and waitresses would be ready to kill you because they trying to make them tips.
Right. And
Uh,
it's not a tip culture there, right? We have a tip culture where they're surviving off the tips. There, you can tip there because we've kind of spread tipping around the world in some aspects, but it's not mandatory. If I leave a €2 tip, they're happy. Like, oh, thank you, $2. Like that. You don't have to go 20% of the bill and all that stuff.
oh, well, so then they must have better hourly wages then.
Yeah, they pay people. Which is, that's a conversation for a different day. But yeah, pay the people that are working.
Yeah. Did you experience any discrimination when you were in there? Being
In Europe
African
or the
American?
military?
Huh?
Europe or the
Both.
military?
Both in Europe and
So I haven't had too many issues in Europe. Jenica has had, I'll be honest, a couple of things in Germany specifically. She's had very unique experiences neither time that I was there. So she has had some unique experience, but so I won't speak for her, but she definitely has had some stuff in Germany specifically. But me personally, I definitely had if you go through a 20-year career, you change commanders every 2 years. Let's say I've had 10 to 12 commanders, depending on what I'm doing, not including deployments. I definitely have had some good and bad commanders, and then I had one that was just he was hell on earth. He was the worst commander I've ever had, and I remember a conversation I had with him, knowing he was going to be the commander. We kind of got off on the wrong foot about some stuff, and then he called me in after he was the commander. It was weird. I kind of let my guard down with him, and he said, "Oh, I know you're one of my what did he say? You're one of my influencers here, so I know people listen to you. So tell me some of the things that are going on in the squadron that I should know about so I can tackle them." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And I was very honest, and I said, "Well, there's specifically what I said was I don't think you should let, especially the younger troops, come directly to your office and kind of, for lack of a better term, bitch and complain to you because you're the commander. There should be several layers, in front of that before that kind of stuff gets to you. And some of the things you've addressed recently was bickering on the plane and things like that could have been addressed at my level or even below." And he kind of went off on me about he wants to know everything in his squadron, and I don't have the right to tell him things he doesn't want to know. And I was in my mind, I'm like, this is 300 people. You want to know everything? Okay, that's weird. And I will say that he kept going on and on. He was yelling and he started cursing a little bit. And that's the one thing in my military career that I'm like, nah, I'm not in the Marines. I'm not in the Army. That's what y'all do. I don't do that. I'm a professional. I expect to be a professional at all times. I felt myself getting to the point where I'm like, I'm getting upset. My ears get, how your ears get hot when you get upset. So I got
yeah.
up and I said, sir, I have to go. And I left. And I want to say that I texted Jenica and I said, yeah, I think I just messed up with my new commander. And from that point on, any little thing that happened, he was on me. And it wasn't just me, right? So it wasn't just me. There was a group of people. And he did have some IG complaints, what is it called? The Inspector General complaints. That's who you complain to if you have a problem with your chain of command. He had a lot of complaints, but he never got really in trouble for anything. But he is known as the worst commander by quite a few people, and it was very targeted at definitely at I would say not all. It wasn't just black people, but it was 90%, and it was just like super harsh punishments for things and just things that even you go talk to the legal office, then they didn't even know what was going on. They're like, what? It was just a weird time, and it was definitely the worst 2 years in the military for me by far.
That's well, you survived it. Did you ever
Yeah,
did you ever think about, okay, I had enough of this?
I 1000% did, but then I also thought about it from this fact that all right, if this is the guy that is making me feel this way versus the job, because if it was the whole environment, I always thought about like, oh, I can outlast this guy. You know what I mean? Like I felt like he would have won if I would have separated at that point because I know my commanders are only going to be there for 2 years. This happened in the first 6 months, and then he really got crazy with it in the first year. So I'm like, all right, I can just put my head down and move, go fly trips, stay away from him. I'm not going to let him defeat me and get me out of here because he's a prick.
Yeah.
But he got people out of the military. There's a lot of people that did left, or he got them out.
Wow.
Yeah, but that I there's obviously ups and downs in every career, and that's my down point. That was all the way. That was like 2015 to 2017. I've had pretty great commanders from then, and he definitely impacted my ability to promote for about 5 or 6 years. Then 2 commanders later, I got an amazing commander. He looked at all that stuff that happened. We went through the process of getting all that removed, and I literally promoted immediately as soon as all that stuff was out my record, because it was just him. He just had like vendettas on people, and there was nothing I could do at the time.
Wow. I'm not real good at handling that kind of stuff, and I think that's just really, I applaud you for. I never knew you were going through that, and I guess there
Yeah,
would be no reason for me to know you were going through that.
yeah, I
But
didn't put it out there too much, and I didn't even tell Jenica like all the details, but a lot of it was I could go because my job is flying. I can get away from him too, right? So it's like, all right, I don't even have to be in this building. Let me go fly, and that usually was all right. I can escape it for a little bit.
oh yeah,
And
so
when I'm home, if I'm at home, I'm not with him, so it didn't. It was just the work hours when I'm not on the road.
yeah. Well, you had a good outlet. You could get on the plane and
For
go
sure.
and take a trip. Did
For
you
sure.
select your trips, or did they pick you for the trips?
No, it was I could do everything by the time I was to a certain point. So it was what do you need me to do? Because when I got to a certain point, I was either instructing a student or evaluating someone. So at that point, it was what do you need done? Okay, yeah, that's fine. And it didn't matter what trip it was, because all the trips were good. To be honest, we didn't really have bad trips. Like sometimes some are better than others, but when you really look at it, when you back out of it, none of the trips were bad. They were all pretty good deals.
Man, I can't believe it. We're down to 1 minute, Danielle.
Oh,
Uh,
you were right. That flew by.
I told you he was gonna fly by. Yeah. What is your plans for now? In about 60 seconds you got.
Okay, well, I'm trying to secure some employment in the communications engineering field up in Maryland, and just put in some hard work for about 10 years, and hopefully ride off into the sunset with my family and just hang out.
Well, it's been great to see you, and thank
For
you so
sure.
much for doing this show. I
I
am
appreciate you
sure,
inviting me on.
yeah, I'm sure my audience got a real kick out of this. I can tell you Cliff did. Thank you. God bless. And I thank you for tuning into the African American